The rain fell hard against the windows of the Blackwater training facility as Maya Chen adjusted her gear for another night of tactical exercises. At 26, she had already proven herself as one of the most promising candidates in the private military training program. Her background in martial arts and her quick thinking had caught the attention of several instructors, but it had also made her some enemies among the other trainees. Maya came from a military family. Her father had served in the Marines, and her older brother Jake was currently deployed as a Navy SEAL somewhere overseas. She carried their legacy with pride, pushing herself harder than anyone else in her group. The other trainees respected her skills, but some resented her natural abilities and the way instructors seemed to favor her performance. Tonight was different. The training exercise was supposed to simulate a hostage rescue scenario in an abandoned warehouse on the facility grounds. Maya had been selected to play the hostage, a role that required her to remain calm under pressure while the other trainees practiced their rescue techniques. She trusted her fellow trainees, even though some had shown jealousy toward her success. The exercise began at midnight. Maya was placed in a small room in the warehouse, her hands bound with training restraints that could be quickly released if needed. The scenario called for the rescue team to locate and extract her within 30 minutes while navigating various obstacles and fake enemies played by instructors. 20 minutes into the exercise, 3 trainees who had consistently performed poorly entered her room. They were supposed to be playing enemy guards, but something felt wrong. Their eyes held a coldness that Maya had never seen during training. Instead of following the script, they began talking about how tired they were of watching her succeed while they struggled. Marcus Webb, the leader of the 3, had failed his last 2 evaluations. His military dreams were slipping away, and he blamed Maya for making him look incompetent by comparison. The other 2, Rodriguez and Patterson, had their own grudges. They felt that Maya received special treatment because of her family connections and natural talent. What started as angry words quickly escalated. They decided to teach Maya a lesson about humility. The training restraints were replaced with real ones. They told her that they would make the rescue more realistic by adding some genuine fear to her performance. Maya tried to reason with them, reminding them that this was just training and that their actions could end their military careers. But the 3 men were beyond listening. Years of frustration, failure, and resentment had built up inside them. They saw Maya as the symbol of everything they couldn't achieve. Webb pulled out a rope, claiming they were going to make the hostage scenario more authentic. The other 2 held Maya while Webb wrapped the rope around her neck. Maya fought back with every technique she knew, but the restraints and the 3-against-1 odds were too much. She managed to activate a small emergency beacon hidden in her gear, but she wasn't sure if anyone would reach her in time. As the rope tightened, her vision began to blur, and she could only think of her brother Jake, and how disappointed he would be if she didn't survive this. Meanwhile, the exercise supervisors had noticed that the rescue team was taking longer than expected. Communications with Maya's room had gone silent, which wasn't part of the planned scenario. Instructor Davis decided to check on the situation personally, bringing 2 security guards with him. They arrived at Maya's location to find her unconscious on the floor, the 3 trainees standing over her in panic. Webb was frantically trying to remove the rope, while Rodriguez and Patterson were arguing about calling for medical help. They had realized too late that their anger had carried them too far. Davis immediately called for emergency medical services, while the security guards restrained the 3 trainees. Maya was rushed to the facility's medical center, where doctors worked to stabilize her condition. She had survived, but barely. The rope had caused significant damage to her throat, and she remained unconscious for several hours. The incident was immediately reported to military authorities and law enforcement. The Blackwater facility faced serious questions about their security protocols and supervision of training exercises. The 3 trainees were arrested and faced charges of attempted murder and assault. Maya's family was contacted immediately. Her parents flew in from their home in Colorado, while emergency messages were sent through military channels to reach Jake. Getting word to him would be complicated due to his classified deployment, but the Navy understood the severity of the situation. As Maya slowly regained consciousness 2 days later, she found her parents at her bedside. Her throat was damaged, making speech difficult and painful. The doctors explained that she had suffered significant trauma and would need time to recover both physically and emotionally. Her dreams of continuing with military training seemed uncertain. The investigation into the incident revealed that Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson had been struggling with their training for months. Their instructors had noted concerning behaviors, but had attributed them to normal stress and competition. The failure to identify and address their escalating resentment was seen as a critical oversight by the facility's leadership. Maya learned that her emergency beacon had saved her life. The signal had alerted the monitoring systems just minutes before Instructor Davis decided to check on the exercise. Without that early warning, the response might have been too late. During her recovery, Maya received visits from other trainees who expressed their shock and support. Many admitted that they had sensed tension from the three men, but never imagined it could lead to violence. The incident had shaken the entire training community and forced everyone to examine the competitive atmosphere they had created. The legal proceedings began while Maya was still recovering. Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson were held without bail due to the severity of their actions. Their military careers were over, and they faced the possibility of spending decades in prison. Their families struggled to understand how their sons had become capable of such violence. Maya's recovery was slow and difficult. The physical damage to her throat required multiple surgeries, and the emotional trauma was equally challenging. She suffered from nightmares and anxiety attacks, especially when in enclosed spaces or around groups of people she didn't know well. Her parents considered encouraging her to abandon her military aspirations and pursue a safer career path. They had nearly lost their daughter and couldn't bear the thought of putting her in danger again. But Maya was determined not to let the actions of three bitter trainees destroy her dreams. The facility offered Maya a full scholarship to return and complete her training once she recovered. They also promised enhanced security measures and better psychological screening for future trainees. However, Maya's trust in the system had been severely damaged. 3 weeks after the incident, Maya received word that her brother Jake was being granted emergency leave to visit her. The Navy had finally managed to contact him and arrange for his temporary return. Maya looked forward to seeing him, but worried about how he would react to what had happened to her. The media had picked up the story of the training facility assault, bringing unwanted attention to Maya and her family. Reporters tried to interview her about the incident, but she wasn't ready to speak publicly about what had happened. Her parents and the facility's legal team worked to protect her privacy during her recovery. Maya spent her days in physical therapy, working to regain full function of her throat and voice. The progress was encouraging, but doctors warned that she might never fully recover her original vocal range. This news was devastating for someone who had planned to lead troops and needed to project authority and command respect. As she worked through her recovery, Maya began to understand the depth of resentment that some people harbored toward successful individuals. She realized that her achievements had made her a target, but she refused to apologize for her dedication and skill. If anything, the incident made her more determined to prove that she belonged in the military world. The preliminary hearings for Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson revealed more details about their planning. The attack hadn't been completely spontaneous. They had discussed their frustrations with Maya for weeks leading up to the incident. This premeditation made their actions even more serious in the eyes of the law. Maya's extended family rallied around her during this time. Cousins and aunts and uncles who served in various branches of the military sent messages of support and encouragement. Their backing reinforced her determination to overcome this setback and continue pursuing her goals. The facility implemented new policies requiring buddy systems during training exercises and increased supervision of scenarios involving restraints or potential danger. They also established better channels for trainees to report concerns about fellow participants before issues escalated to violence. As Maya's strength returned, she began to think about her future more concretely. She knew that returning to training would be difficult, but she also knew that giving up would mean letting her attackers win. Her brother would be arriving soon, and she wanted to show him that she was still the strong, determined sister he had always known. The week before Jake's arrival, Maya made her first public statement about the incident. She thanked the medical staff and her supporters while expressing hope that changes in training protocols would prevent similar attacks in the future. She also made it clear that she intended to complete her military training and serve her country as planned. Jake Chen arrived at Denver International Airport on a military transport plane after being extracted from his classified mission in Southeast Asia. The Navy had moved quickly once they understood the severity of his sister's situation. As a decorated SEAL with multiple combat deployments, Jake was given priority for emergency leave. The flight had given him 12 hours to process what little information the Navy had shared about Maya's attack. Someone had tried to strangle his sister during a training exercise. 3 men were in custody. Maya was alive but traumatized. The sparse details made his imagination race with worst-case scenarios. Jake's parents met him at the airport, and the reunion was emotional but tense. His mother, Elena, could barely speak without crying as she tried to explain what had happened. His father, retired Marine Sergeant David Chen, provided the tactical details with military precision, but Jake could see the rage burning behind his controlled exterior. During the drive to the hospital, Jake learned more about the 3 attackers. Marcus Webb was 24, from a military family in Texas, but had consistently failed his evaluations. Rodriguez came from the inner city and saw military service as his only path to a better life. Patterson was from a wealthy family who expected him to serve with distinction like his grandfather and father. Jake's jaw tightened as he heard about the premeditated nature of the attack. This wasn't a training accident or a moment of poor judgment. These men had planned to hurt his sister because they couldn't handle their own failures. In his world, such cowardice deserved the harshest possible response. When Jake first saw Maya in her hospital room, his heart nearly broke. His strong, confident sister looked small and fragile, with visible bruising around her neck and medical equipment monitoring her condition. When she spoke, her voice was raspy and painful to hear, but her eyes still held the same determination that had always defined her. Maya tried to smile when she saw her brother, but Jake could see through her brave front. Someone had tried to kill his sister, and that someone was going to pay. He held her hand gently while promising that everything would be okay. But inside his mind was already working on plans that went far beyond the legal system. Over the next few days, Jake spent most of his time at Maya's side, helping with her physical therapy and supporting her through the emotional challenges of recovery. He met with doctors, lawyers, and facility administrators, asking detailed questions about security procedures and the backgrounds of the attackers. The legal team assigned to Maya's case was competent but overworked. They assured Jake that the 3 men would face serious prison time, but the wheels of justice moved slowly. Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson were being held in county jail while awaiting trial, and their defense attorneys were already working on plea bargain arrangements. Jake attended one of the preliminary hearings and watched the 3 men as they sat with their lawyers. Webb looked defiant, as if he still believed his actions were justified. Rodriguez appeared nervous and kept glancing around the courtroom. Patterson seemed broken, staring at his hands while his expensive lawyer whispered in his ear. After the hearing, Jake approached the prosecutor handling the case. District Attorney Sarah Williams was experienced with violent crimes, but admitted that this case presented unique challenges. The incident had occurred during a training exercise, which complicated questions of intent and premeditation. Williams explained that the defense attorneys were arguing that their clients had gotten carried away during what was supposed to be realistic training. They claimed that the use of the rope was meant to add authenticity to the hostage scenario, not to actually harm Maya. Jake found this argument insulting and made his feelings clear to the prosecutor. The prosecutor promised to push for maximum sentences, but she also warned Jake that plea bargains might result in lighter punishments. The system was designed to encourage settlements rather than expensive trials, and the defendant's attorneys were skilled at finding loopholes and technicalities. Jake began conducting his own investigation into the three attackers. Using contacts from his military service, he accessed background information that wasn't available to civilian prosecutors. He learned about Webb's history of aggression during previous training programs, Rodriguez's financial desperation that made him prone to poor decisions, and Patterson's family pressure that had created serious psychological issues. More importantly, Jake discovered that the three men had been communicating with each other for weeks before the attack. Text messages and social media posts revealed their growing resentment toward Maya and their discussions about teaching her a lesson. This evidence could prove premeditation, but it hadn't been uncovered by the official investigation. Jake shared this information with the prosecutor, who was grateful for the additional evidence, but concerned about how it had been obtained. Some of Jake's sources operated in gray areas that might not hold up in court. However, the information gave them new directions for their official investigation. While Jake worked on building the legal case, he also began gathering intelligence on the personal lives of the three attackers. He learned their daily routines in jail, their family members' addresses, and their financial situations. This information served no legal purpose, but Jake had other plans in mind. Maya's recovery continued to progress, but slowly. The damage to her vocal cords was more severe than initially thought, and doctors now estimated that she might never regain her full voice. For someone who planned to lead troops in combat, this was a devastating blow to her career prospects. The psychological impact was equally challenging. Maya experienced panic attacks when people approached her from behind, and she had difficulty sleeping without nightmares about the attack. The facility had provided counseling services, but progress was slow. Jake watched his sister struggle with these challenges, while their attackers sat in relatively comfortable jail cells, eating regular meals and receiving visits from family members. The contrast made him increasingly angry with a legal system that seemed more concerned with protecting the rights of criminals than delivering justice to victims. 3 weeks into his leave, Jake received word that his unit was requesting his return. The mission he had been pulled from was reaching a critical phase, and his specialized skills were needed. He requested an extension but was told that national security requirements took priority over personal situations. The prospect of leaving Maya while her attackers remained alive and relatively unharmed was unacceptable to Jake. He had sworn an oath to protect his country, but his first loyalty was to his family. He began making preparations for actions that would need to be completed before his return to duty. Jake's military experience included extensive training in surveillance, infiltration, and elimination of high-value targets. He had applied these skills in foreign countries against enemy combatants, but the techniques could be adapted for domestic situations if necessary. The county jail where the 3 men were being held was a modern facility with good security, but Jake had breached more secure locations during his overseas deployments. He began conducting reconnaissance of the jail's routines, guard rotations, and security vulnerabilities. Maya noticed changes in her brother's behavior during this time. He became more distant and spent long hours away from the hospital without explaining where he was going. When she asked about his activities, he provided vague answers about meeting with lawyers and investigators. Elena and David Chen also noticed their son's increasingly dark mood. They understood his anger about the attack on Maya, but they worried about what he might be planning. David had served in combat and recognized the look in Jake's eyes. It was the expression of someone preparing for war. The family held a difficult conversation about Jake's upcoming return to duty. Maya insisted that she didn't want him to sacrifice his military career for her sake. She was getting stronger every day, and the legal system would eventually deliver justice. Jake listened to these arguments, but didn't commit to any specific course of action. District Attorney Williams called Jake with an update on the case. The defense attorneys were pushing harder for plea bargains, offering to accept charges of assault rather than attempted murder. The sentences would be significantly lighter, but Williams felt that the evidence might not support the more serious charges at trial. This news was the final straw for Jake. The men who had tried to murder his sister might serve only a few years in prison before returning to their lives. Maya would carry the scars of their attack forever, while they would eventually be free to hurt other people. Jake made his decision that night while sitting beside Maya's hospital bed. She was sleeping peacefully for once, without the nightmares that usually plagued her rest. He kissed her forehead gently and whispered a promise that she would never have to worry about her attackers again. The next morning, Jake told his parents that he had to handle some final business before returning to his unit. He would be gone for a few days, but would return to say goodbye before leaving for his deployment. David Chen suspected what his son was planning, but didn't try to stop him. Jake spent his final day in Denver completing his preparations. He acquired the equipment he would need through military surplus stores and private contacts. He confirmed the schedules and routines he had observed at the county jail. Most importantly, he reviewed the files he had compiled on Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson. That evening, Jake visited Maya one last time before beginning his mission. She was in better spirits, having received news that her vocal therapy was showing more progress than expected. She might not fully recover, but she would be able to speak clearly enough to continue her military training if she chose to do so. Maya talked excitedly about her plans to return to the training facility once she was fully healed. She wanted to show everyone that the attack hadn't broken her spirit. Jake listened and smiled, knowing that she would never have to face her attackers again, but she would never know the price of that freedom. As Jake prepared to leave the hospital, Maya grabbed his hand and made him promise to stay safe during his next deployment. She told him that losing him would be worse than anything the three attackers had done to her. Jake promised to come home safely, a pledge he intended to keep despite the risks he was about to take. That night, Jake checked into a hotel near the county jail under a false identity. He reviewed his plans one final time and set his alarm for the early morning hours when security would be lightest. Tomorrow would be the last day that Webb, Rodriguez, and Patterson would see sunlight, and Jake felt no remorse about what was coming. Jake woke at 4:30 a.m., his internal clock precise after years of military training. The county jail's morning shift change occurred at 6 a.m., providing a brief window when security protocols were most vulnerable. He had studied the facility's routines for 2 weeks and identified the optimal time for infiltration. His equipment was minimal but effective: dark clothing, lockpicks acquired through military contacts, and items that could disable security cameras without triggering immediate alarms. Jake had learned these skills during special operations training, never imagining he would use them on American soil against his own countrymen. The jail was a modern facility built 15 years earlier with state-of-the-art security features. However, Jake had breached more secure locations during overseas missions. The key was patience, timing, and understanding that every security system had human weaknesses that could be exploited. Jake approached the jail from the service entrance used by delivery trucks and maintenance workers. The loading dock area had limited camera coverage, and the guard stationed there often stepped away during shift changes to coordinate with incoming personnel. Jake had observed this routine multiple times. At 5:45 a.m., Jake scaled the perimeter fence and made his way to the loading dock. The guard was inside, distracted by paperwork and radio communications with the incoming shift. Jake disabled the 2 security cameras covering the area using a small device that looped their previous footage, making his presence invisible to the monitoring station. The service entrance lock was electronic, but had a mechanical backup that Jake could bypass with his specialized tools. Within 3 minutes, he was inside the jail's lower level, which housed maintenance areas and storage rooms. The real challenge was reaching the cell blocks without triggering the numerous motion sensors and cameras throughout the facility. Jake moved through maintenance corridors that didn't appear on public building plans but were visible in construction documents he had accessed through military intelligence channels. These passages allowed him to avoid main hallways while still reaching his targets. The 3 attackers were housed in different sections of the jail to prevent them from coordinating their stories or planning together. Webb was in maximum security due to his aggressive behavior since being incarcerated. Rodriguez was in general population but isolated for his own protection. Patterson was in protective custody at his lawyer's request. Jake decided to start with Webb, who posed the greatest physical threat and had shown no remorse for attacking Maya. The maximum security wing had the tightest surveillance, but it also had the most predictable routines. Guards performed cell checks every 30 minutes, but there was a 12-minute gap when they were all at the security station reviewing logs. Webb was sleeping when Jake reached his cell. The electronic lock required a security code that Jake had observed a guard entering during his reconnaissance. The system was supposed to log all access, but Jake had prepared a device that could temporarily disable the recording function. Webb woke to find a dark figure standing over his bed. Before he could cry out, Jake clamped a hand over his mouth and spoke in a whisper that carried absolute authority. Webb's eyes widened as he realized this wasn't a guard or another inmate. This was someone far more dangerous. Jake identified himself as Maya's brother and explained that Webb had made a critical error in judgment. Attacking a SEAL's sister was a mistake that required correction. Webb tried to struggle, but years of combat training had taught Jake exactly how to immobilize an opponent quickly and quietly. The conversation that followed was brief but comprehensive. Jake explained what Webb's life would look like if he survived this encounter. Even if he served his full sentence, Jake would be waiting when he was released. Webb's family would never be safe, and every moment of his remaining life would be spent looking over his shoulder. Webb tried to claim that the attack on Maya had been an accident, a training exercise that got out of hand. Jake had read the text messages and social media posts that proved premeditation. He knew about the weeks of planning and the deliberate decision to seriously harm his sister. As Webb realized the hopelessness of his situation, Jake offered him a choice. He could face justice now, quickly and quietly, or he could spend the next several decades in prison knowing that his family was marked for retribution. Webb's response revealed the cowardice that had led him to attack Maya in the first place. Jake concluded his business with Webb efficiently and professionally. There was no anger or emotion in his actions, only the cold precision of someone trained to eliminate threats to national security. In Jake's mind, anyone who attacked his family had declared themselves an enemy combatant. Rodriguez was next, housed in general population but isolated in a single cell for his protection. The guards in this section were less vigilant than those in maximum security, making Jake's approach easier. Rodriguez was awake when Jake arrived, unable to sleep due to anxiety about his upcoming trial. The conversation with Rodriguez took a different tone. Unlike Webb, Rodriguez showed genuine remorse for his actions and tried to explain the financial pressure that had driven him to make poor decisions. Jake listened patiently but explained that good intentions didn't excuse attempted murder. Rodriguez begged for mercy, claiming that he had a family who depended on him and that he had never intended to seriously hurt Maya. Jake pointed out that Maya also had a family who loved her, and they had nearly lost her due to Rodriguez's choices. The consequences of actions couldn't be undone by regret. Jake gave Rodriguez the same choice he had offered Webb: quick justice now, or a lifetime of looking over his shoulder for retribution. Rodriguez chose differently than Webb, but the outcome was the same. Jake left his cell with one fewer threat to his sister's future safety. Patterson was the most challenging target because protective custody meant constant monitoring and limited access. However, Jake had noticed that Patterson received regular visits from his high-powered defense attorney, and these meetings occurred in a private consultation room with reduced surveillance. Jake waited until the scheduled attorney visit and interceded Patterson while he was being transported to the meeting room. The guards assumed Jake was an authorized official based on his confident demeanor and knowledge of jail procedures. By the time they realized their mistake, Jake had already completed his business with Patterson. Patterson had been the most reluctant participant in the attack on Maya, acting primarily due to peer pressure and family expectations. However, Jake explained that willing participation was still participation. Patterson had held Maya while Webb attempted to strangle her, making him equally guilty in Jake's judgment. The conversation with Patterson was the longest of the three. He tried to negotiate, offering information about other planned attacks by frustrated trainees and promising to testify against his co-conspirators. Jake listened to these offers, but explained that the time for deals had passed when Patterson chose to attack his sister. Patterson's wealthy family had hired expensive lawyers who were confident they could get him minimal jail time through plea bargaining and technicalities. Jake informed him that justice wouldn't be delayed or diminished by legal maneuvering. Patterson faced the same choice as the others, and he made his decision accordingly. By 7:30 a.m., Jake had completed his mission and was leaving the jail through the same route he had used for entry. The shift change was complete, and the morning routine was beginning normally. It would be several hours before anyone discovered what had happened to the three attackers. Jake drove to a remote location where he disposed of his equipment and changed clothes. He then proceeded to the airport, where he caught a commercial flight to California before connecting to a military transport that would return him to his unit. His emergency leave was officially over, and he needed to resume his duties. The discovery of the three bodies at the county jail created immediate chaos among law enforcement officials. Initial investigations assumed that the deaths were the result of inmate violence, possibly ordered by other prisoners who disapproved of attacks on women. The jail's security footage had been mysteriously corrupted during the night shift. Maya learned about the deaths while watching the morning news in her hospital room. The reporter described the incident as a possible gang retaliation against the three men who had attacked a female military trainee. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that her attackers would never hurt anyone else, but also concern about what this meant for the legal case. District Attorney Williams called Maya's family to inform them that the criminal case was obviously concluded due to the defendants' deaths. She expressed sympathy for the family's loss of the opportunity to see justice served through the court system. However, she also noted that the case had been facing significant challenges due to technical legal issues. Maya's parents received the news about the three deaths with carefully controlled reactions. David Chen understood exactly what had happened, but he said nothing to his wife or daughter. Some forms of justice operated outside the legal system, and some threats required elimination rather than incarceration. Elena Chen suspected that her son was involved, but chose not to ask questions she didn't want answered. She focused on supporting Maya's continued recovery and helping her prepare to resume her military training once she was physically and emotionally ready. The investigation into the jail deaths continued for several months, but never identified any suspects. Security camera malfunctions were attributed to system glitches, and no physical evidence pointed to outside involvement. The case was eventually classified as unsolved, though investigators privately believed it was an inside job. Jake returned to his unit and completed his deployment without incident. He received commendations for his performance during the mission and was recommended for promotion to senior enlisted leadership. His commanding officers noted his professional demeanor and dedication to duty. 6 months after the attack, Maya returned to military training at a different facility, with enhanced security protocols. Her voice had recovered enough to allow her to command effectively, though she would always carry the physical scars of the attack. More importantly, she had overcome the psychological trauma through counseling and her own determination. Maya excelled in her resumed training, graduating at the top of her class and receiving multiple commendations for leadership and tactical excellence. Her experience surviving the attack had given her insights into human psychology and threat assessment that made her an exceptional military officer. The Blackwater Training Facility implemented comprehensive reforms following the incident. New psychological screening procedures were designed to identify potentially dangerous trainees before they could act on their resentments. Supervision of training exercises was increased, and emergency response protocols were enhanced. Maya never learned the truth about what happened to her attackers, and she never asked Jake about his activities during his emergency leave. Some questions were better left unasked, and some answers were too dangerous to know. She focused on her future rather than dwelling on the past. Jake was promoted to Master Chief Petty Officer and became a senior instructor for other Navy SEALs. His experience protecting his family had reinforced his commitment to protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. He specialized in counter-terrorism operations that prevented attacks before they could occur. The relationship between Jake and Maya grew even stronger following the incident. They maintained regular communication despite their demanding military careers, and Maya knew that she could count on her brother's protection no matter where their duties took them. Years later, Maya would become a respected military officer who specialized in training other female personnel for combat roles. She used her experience surviving the attack to help others overcome similar challenges and build the confidence needed for military service. Jake continued his SEAL career with distinction, participating in classified missions around the world. He never spoke about the events in Denver, but he carried the satisfaction of knowing that his sister could sleep peacefully without worrying about revenge from her attackers. The story of Maya's attack became a case study in military training academies, used to teach future officers about the importance of identifying and addressing toxic behaviors before they escalated to violence. The reforms implemented following the incident helped prevent similar attacks at other facilities. Maya and Jake both understood that justice sometimes required actions that couldn't be discussed in polite society. They had been raised in a military family that valued protecting others above personal safety, and they both lived by that code throughout their careers. The three families of the attackers never learned the truth about their sons' deaths. They grieved their losses while struggling to understand how their children had become capable of such violence. The incident served as a reminder that hatred and resentment could destroy lives on both sides of any conflict. Maya kept the emergency beacon that had saved her life during the attack. It served as a reminder that survival often depended on preparation, quick thinking, and the knowledge that someone was always watching out for her safety. In her case, that someone was a Navy SEAL who took his protective duties very seriously.